Good evening, folks, and thank you for being here for our presentation, our series, The Crisis in the Holy Land, and our penultimate event where we welcome Pastor Khader El-Yateem with us this evening. And it's the final piece. He will be speaking on a topic of resistance through existence. I have a couple of opening remarks as we prepare, and then I'll do a better introduction when we get there. After Khader speaks, there's an opportunity for Q&A, some questions if you have. We are live streaming, and so for people to be able to hear your question out in the ether, we'd appreciate it if you use the microphone over here that I will turn on at the appropriate time. We also, after questions, so you might want to not have too many questions, because we have sweets from Farhat Sweets in Troy as a treat afterwards. You can't go now. But of course, we are here in part because of the events of October 7th, 2023. But it's also true, of course, that October 7th did not start things. It was just another ugly event in a long history of ugly events. And as we have been here at Church of the Master, studying and reading over the last couple months, one of the things we have discovered, I think, is the challenges of the ways Christian scriptures have been used to justify atrocities. In preparation, as we read The Other Side of the Wall by Pastor Munder Isaac, the pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, which were donated to us by our good friends at Good Shepherd, a contribution from them for which we are thankful. Pastor Munder reminds us of a few things. He reminds us the land was never intended to be owned. All are caretakers, and ultimately the land belongs to God. And it comes with responsibilities to care for those who are present. And he goes on to write, all of the injustices are amplified since 1948 and Nakba, or the catastrophe, when 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes with a promise of later returning, a promise which remains unfulfilled as countless Palestinians live in refugee camps so long established they resemble towns and cities. Now, when we talk about these topics, our language is important, and the words we use are important. It was very intentional that we called this series The Crisis in the Holy Land and not The Conflict in the Holy Land. As Pastor Munder argues, conflict gives you the idea that there are two equal sides kind of going at it against each other. But the crisis between Israel and Palestine is between an occupying force made up of one of the best equipped militaries in the world against a people subject to the indignities and miseries of occupation. Countless checkpoints, lack of freedom of movement, administrative detention without charges, all kinds of injustices. In the response to this, about 20 years ago, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the ELCA, created a group called Peace Not Walls to advocate for and to offer accompaniment, advocacy, and awareness raising. The name, though, in the last 20 years, in particular in the last several years, has kind of lost its meaning. The notion of peace with an imbalance of power so great has some of the problems as the word conflict. Similar challenges. So the group has been renamed, and that group has now been renamed Sumud, for Justice and Peace in Palestine and Israel. Sumud's an Arabic word. It means steadfastness. It's widely used by Palestinian theologians and offers to signify Palestinian resistance to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands and peoples. That resistance takes the form of nonviolent advocacy for political change, as well as resistance through existence, embodied in education, social work, the arts, and one's relationships with land and community. Sumud, the new name, recommits the ELCA to advocacy and awareness raising, which is part of what we're doing here this evening, grounded in accompaniment to the Palestinian people, our primary partners in the region. And it's very important that we have people like Pastor Khader, who are Palestinian, who are part of that conversation and part of that process, so that we are listening to the people living these realities. Palestinians, and especially Palestinian Christians, are a minority within a minority. but their ministries of education and healthcare, social service, and justice work are huge gifts to the people of Palestine. Countless people are educated through the Lutheran schools, especially in the West Bank, and that is an amazing gift. Samud follows the guidance of our Palestinian church partners. Updating the name helps to reflect the situation on the ground, that only when justice prevails in the Holy Land, when occupation ends and human rights are restored, then when rights are restored to Palestinians, there can be true and lasting peace. The idea of Samud, or grit, or the Finnish sisu, is also reflected in Pastor Khader's talk tonight, Resistance Through Existence. Pastor Khader El-Yateem is the Executive Director for Service and Justice, the home area in the ELCA. It's a new position. He was most recently an assistant to the bishop in Florida, the Florida Bahamas Synod, and prior to that, the founding pastor of Salam Arabic Lutheran Church in Brooklyn, New York. And we watched Father K the movie and learned about his bid for city council position in Brooklyn. And learn more about him and his journey in that. If you haven't watched Father K the movie, you can find it on many of the platforms. Costs $3 or $4. It's worth it. Spend the money, download it, watch it. It's a good 30 minutes of your life, and you can get back to streaming whatever it is that you've been binging. Father K the movie, a beautiful documentary and a testimony. Pastor El-Yateem is passionate and gracious. He has an amazing sense of humor. He has experienced personal hardship and suffering living in the occupied West Bank. And even though he lives in the United States, many of his friends and family members live in the occupied territories. And their struggles and the struggles and sufferings of the Palestinian people motivate him. And yet he has this beautiful spirit and a gorgeous smile, as I'm sure you've already experienced if you've just been in the room with him. It is a deep pleasure and privilege to have him here, and even deeper gift for me to call him my brother. Pastor Khader.
Shukran. Well, I want to cry to see so many people show up on a Saturday afternoon to a church and sit here to listen about subject thousands of miles away. But that gives me hope, seeing you here tonight. It tells me that you are truly trying to live into your discipleship and relationship to your neighbor and to make a difference in the world as advocates for peace and justice. So I am deeply humbled tonight by your presence and for this invitation to be with you. Yes, he twisted my arm to come, and he reached out to me as I was taking this in your position. But I was grateful for the invitation, but more grateful for you, for this church, for your willingness to take a risk for the sake of the other. And for that, I am deeply grateful, and I'm so humbled to be with you this evening. So thank you for the invitation. Pastor Paul, it's always a big honor and a great joy to see you, my friend. We got to do some traveling together. We got to share a few conversations and smoke some hookah. Oops, maybe I'm not supposed to say that. But we did, and it was fantastic. And I am glad to come and visit you here at your home congregation. And thank you for your love, for your hospitality, for your solidarity and standing with the people of Palestine. Brothers and sisters, my name is Khader El-Yateem. As Paul says, I serve as the Executive Director of Service and Justice. I was born and raised in the Bethlehem region, so I always say that Jesus is my cousin, but he's on my mother's side, because that's the good side of the family. Yes, my father is carpenter, and no, I am not going to be crucified. Maybe tonight after this presentation, we'll see. But let me give you some background about me. I was brought to the United States in 1992 by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I came to this country as a missionary. The ELCA came to Palestine in 1991. They approached me to come to the U.S. to be a missionary, and I said no. Because I didn't want to leave my country, I never wanted to leave my people. I was deeply committed and grounded in my culture, with my family, with my people. But in 1992, the ELCA came back again and said, we really need you to come to the US, we need you, and the bishop is highly recommending you, so please say yes. And I said yes, and they said, what changed? I said, well, I met the woman of my dreams, and she lives in the US. So if you say no, God always finds a way to twist your arm to say yes. So he put that woman in my life, who is a Palestinian born in Jerusalem, and she moved to the US here with her family, and I got to meet her through working together through a group called Operation Smile, which provided, I don't know if you are familiar with Operation Smile or not, but we did medical missions, we provided the cliff and palate surgeries, and we led many trips, many of them to Palestine, and that's how we got to meet. So I say, I'm born in Bethlehem, we gave Jesus life. She was born in Jerusalem, they killed Jesus. Thank God for the resurrection. So for tonight, when Pastor Paul spoke to me about what can we tell the people who are going to come, and I wanted to speak to you about resistance through existence. Because what we are witnessing in the Holy Land now is not something new. It's not something that was born yesterday. This is part of the colonial settler movement that went from country to country, even here in the US, and now we're seeing the colonial settler movement come to the Holy Land, and where they are trying to push out the indigenous Palestinian people. They are trying to confiscate our lands, take our homes, and push us out at any price they can. For me, and I see some Palestinians here also with me tonight, I was born and raised under the Israeli occupation. I was born in 1968, so I was born 1 year after the establishment of the 1967 war. And I live in the West Bank, and as you know, the West Bank was occupied in 1967, okay? So I grew up in the Holy Land all my life under occupation. The only reality I knew and understood was the occupation. It controlled my life, it controlled my movement, it controlled where I can go and not go, it controlled what time I need to be home, and it was a life of fear, a life of a crisis, because every time I left home to go to the school, to go to the church, to go to play with my friends, my mother will pay the price for that because she will keep worrying about me if I'm going to return or not. Now, I am a Palestinian Christian. I was not converted to Christianity yesterday. Actually, if you read in the book of Acts, we were converted to Christianity at the day of Pentecost, which we'll be celebrating tomorrow. So I hope you will wear red tomorrow. Okay? My family actually, when we go, I was born and raised in the Greek Orthodox Church in that little town of Beit Jala, west of Bethlehem. And our home congregation is actually more than 500 years old, so older than the United States. And when we go into the church records, we can see our family history going back to generations in that church. So we are not people who just came. We are the indigenous people of Palestine. So for me, I was born and raised there under the Israeli occupation. And all my reality was defined by the occupation. I remember one time going to school at the age of 14, and the Israeli soldiers decided to put a checkpoint right before the school. And they stopped me with my best friend, Jamal, and they asked us to dance. And I said, no, we are not dancing. I said, no, you need to dance. And I said, well, I'm not dancing. So what happened? They start firing at our legs so we can dance. Imagine for a little boy, 14 years old, with a soldier who is about 18, 19 years old, fully equipped with a military uniform, with M16 made by the US, firing at your foot. At the age of 18, I was sleeping in my bed. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to my father standing on top of my head, waking me up, saying, wake up, do not be afraid. And I woke up and I said, what's happening? And before he can answer me, I just felt these people rushing me into my bed and slammed me down. I couldn't move. A bag was put on my head, my hands was tied behind my back, and I was thrown into a military jeep and I was taken to prison. That was at the age of 18. And I spent 56 days in the Israeli prison, tortured every day, interrogated every day, questioned every day. For 56 days, I never took a shower or changed my clothes, shaved my beard, this beard actually from the prison, cut my nails, or changed my underclothes. For 56 days, when I was in the Israeli prison, I was treated as a complete animal. And that is part of the Israeli dehumanization that they do to the Palestinians to justify the killing, and it's okay. The moment you do humanize somebody, you are giving yourself permission to kill them, to torture them, because they are less than you. So I spent 56 days in prison every single day, tortured, in solitary confinement, and every single day getting beaten, put it in so many different psychological wherefore to break you down. So I can confess to something I did not do. After 56 days, I was released from prison. Till this day, I don't know why I was arrested, and I have no clue why I was released. But this is not the story of only me. This is the story of so many Palestinian young people. Pastor Mitri Rahib, in his book about Bethlehem Besieged, he wrote something in that book which really captures the reality of what young Palestinian people go through. He said, our young people don't have hope living, but they have hope dying. When you take their liberties, when you put them in this separation wall, close them, they have no hope in a job or getting married or owning a house or travel or experience life. It'll be easier for them to commit an act of suicide and die because you are promised so much in death more than you are promised in life. So when we sit and watch the news and wonder why the Palestinian people are doing these things, because they have no reason to live, because the occupation has made it so miserable, so difficult, the closures, the checkpoints, no schools. My cousin, Ra'fat, we celebrated his wedding. It was a glorious wedding. I wish you were there. You know, Palestinian weddings are really beautiful, right? And he decided, because of the closures and lack of travel, that he just built this new little house and he will do his honeymoon in his house. So we finished the party. We have a lot of food, a lot of drinks, a lot of dancing. Then we escort him to his house to go start his honeymoon, and we leave. 30 minutes later, the Israeli soldiers banging in his new door. He opens the door, they take him. 6 months of administrative arrest. What does that mean, administrative arrest? They are not obligated to tell you why they arrested you and what you are charged for. They took him to the desert for 6 months. Renewed by another 6 months, renewed by another 6 months. 18 months straight on the night of his wedding that he spent in the desert in prison. So when we talk about resistance through existence, that is something huge. The fact that we are willing to remain in the land, that is the biggest nonviolent resistance to the occupation, just to stay in the land. And that's why, even though I agreed to come to the US and live here, my being, my heart is still there. My sisters live there, my family live there, my extended family live there, And my sister, the youngest one, Nisreen, about 10 years ago, she got the green card to come to the US. And after talking to her husband and went through great discernment, they decided to refuse to take the green card, to leave and come to this country. Because they are so committed to the land that they couldn't leave it. So let me say two things. One, we as the church have a responsibility and obligation. How we are living into our discipleship in relationship to our neighbor. How we are practicing our faith in action. How are we living into that discipleship in relationship to our neighbor, especially when our neighbor is experiencing death, destruction, and dehumanization? How we, as the church, stand up and take the risk for the sake of the other to speak and advocate for peace and justice. Tonight, I am not here to convince you to be pro-Palestinians. And if I have not convinced you not to be pro-Israelis, then I have failed. Tonight, I am here to convince you to be pro-peace. Because the peace of the Palestinians or the peace of the Israelis, it depends on each other. The Israelis will never realize peace or have peace or security unless the Palestinians have the right for self-determination and have their own right to exist and to live in safety. Israel tries to make peace with all the Arab countries and ignore the Palestinians. Therefore, that peace is not sustainable. It's not real. The peace has to start at home with the Palestinians, and then everybody else will follow. But Israel always tried to avoid the question of Palestine and refuses to recognize the right of the Palestinians to exist in their own homeland. Before 1948, I will meet with my great-grandmother, and she will tell me, oh, our neighbors were Jews. And one of her fondest memories, when they used to bake the bread for tabun, which is a clay oven, and they will sit there and bake the bread together. She said, we never experienced any of that hate or hostility. But when the Zionist movement was created, the Zionist movement really generated this hostility and hate between Arabs and Israelis and Jews. The second thing I want to say, we as the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America have been engaged in the Palestine-Israeli question for a long time. We started with peace, not walls. Guess what? The wall is already built. The separation wall is there. The ethnic cleansing is happening. Genocide is unfolding right before our eyes right now. So we moved from peace, not walls, to sumud, which means steadfastness, as we continue to engage in Palestine and Israel to advocate for justice, which is required for peace. Oftentimes we talk about peace, peace, peace. No, we need to talk about justice. The Palestinian people now are not ready to hear of peace. They want justice. They want immediate ceasefire. They need humanitarian aid. We need to end the crisis and the disaster situation in Gaza. We spent $520 million in Gaza to build that joke that Biden built, that little pier, so we can get humanitarian aid. $520 million where we have already mechanism in place. We give the Palestinians a few packages of food, and we give Israel billions of dollars worth of bombs to kill them. Which one do you want? You want to feed them, or do you want to kill them? And we are saying to our US government, we refuse that you use our tax money to support an illegal occupation that victimizes, harasses, dehumanizes another nation, and it breaks all the international laws. We refuse that our weapons be used against civilians. We refuse that our tax money kill over 14,000 children in Gaza. Brothers and sisters, we need to end the cycle of violence. If you think, or we think, that war is going to bring peace, we are mistaken. It is our duty and call that we invite our government, our elected officials, to put pressure on the Israeli government to go back to the negotiating table. We are advocating for a two-state solution with a shared Jerusalem, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews can have the same rights and same access to that holy city, where they can go and worship, they can live in peace and harmony without the tyranny of the occupation. Many Israelis are living in fear today. They are not living in peace. And all these voices in Israel who support peace have been silenced by the right-wing government of Netanyahu. And I always say that we need to really empower these Israelis to take a stronger stand, to confront their own government and put pressure on their own government to end the occupation. Because that is the only way to coexistence and peace. Sorry, I would just need to go a little bit more. The other thing I want you to know, that through Sumud, we have created a lot of good materials. And I feel tonight I'm preaching to the choir, but that's okay. We have created a lot of materials, especially about advocacy, that will help you when you reach out to your elected official and speak to them about how they are representing you, how they are using your tax money. So please go to the elca.org and look for Sumud and look for the materials that are there. And we want you to become our partner in this important work that we are called to do. In the Bible, in 2 Corinthians, Paul speaks about this message of reconciliation. And that the message of reconciliation has been given to us as the disciples of Jesus. Each one of you is an ambassador as a disciple of Jesus. A disciple that is called and sent and commissioned for the sake of the world that God loves. Through our discipleship, we make ourselves aware of the need of our neighbor. The ELCA Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan, the Holy Land, they are our companions. And we work very closely with them. We learn their stories, they tell us about their work and advocacy, and we see how they get involved and engaged in the work of peace and reconciliation. We can take a lesson from them as they continue to be rooted in that land and witnesses to the gospel, and their light shine in the darkest moments of the history of that land. And that's why we are invited to accompany them, to pray for them, to support them, to stand with them, and to give them voice. Oftentimes we speak about giving voice to the voiceless, and I don't think that is fair. Because we need to give the right for people to speak for themselves. And that's why I say we need to give voice to the voiceless, to be able to come and speak and tell their story and the pain and the suffering that they are experiencing because of the occupation. After I was released from prison, you know, you go out from prison, people come to see you, you know, everybody comes to visit, and they will think that you are a hero, which is it's not. But then everybody start coming to recruit you and start trying to take you to be part of their party. For me, I needed to make a decision for myself. And the decision was, why this happened to me? Why did I experience this pain and suffering? Why I was put in prison when I didn't do anything? And from that moment, I started thinking about how can I feel and understand the pain of the other? How can I commit myself to the cause of peace and justice? How I can fight the systems that dehumanize and take and steals away people's hopes and dreams. And that's why I started this evening to say, you give me hope. You give me a reason to celebrate. When I see people who are committed to the issues of justice, that's where I see the disciple of Jesus most active in their life. And the Palestinian people today, they need you more than ever. And that's why we are calling for immediate ceasefire, the flow of humanitarian aid from all entrances, and ending and supplying the state of Israel with weapons. But also I will be fake and unjust if I don't say the following statement. As an Arab, Palestinian, Christian, Lutheran pastor, I also demand the return of the Israeli hostages, because they deserve a freedom and be reunited with their families. As much as the Palestinians in Israeli prisons without any charge to be returned to their families. Because I can tell you from my experience and the pain and suffering and the torture that I have seen in the Israeli prisons, now with this current situation and after October 7, these guys are being tortured beyond belief. We are hearing stories where people their hands are tied and they have to amputate their arms because the blood is not flowing anymore. The Israeli doctors themselves are reporting the horrifying crimes that happen against the Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons. Brothers and sisters, what happened on October 7, yes, it is tragic, because any human being is killed is tragic. And I don't support killing. We support peace. But we need to understand what happened on October 7 was not the result of only October 7. It has the result of 75 years of war and occupation. Gaza was under siege for 17 years. And the moment people have the chance to resist and to fight, they did fight. But we cannot classify this whole war in the context and from the view of October 7. We need to look at 1947 and what happened to 1967 till 2024, where the injustice of the occupation continued to inflict pain and suffering on the Palestinian people. And I'm not here speaking to you about something I read in book. I am speaking to you about my own experience. Pastor Munder Ishaq speaks about the Bible and how is the Bible is being weaponized against the Palestinian people. How is the Bible and the prophecies being interpreted in a way to victimize us and to take away our land. As we see now also how hunger is being weaponized against the people of Gaza. So as Christians, we need to really create a responsible theology to fight the Zionist Christian ideology that does not recognize the Palestinian Christian church existence. I go to some meetings and there are some Christian Zionists there. They refuse to speak to me as a Palestinian Christian. They refuse to deal with us. They don't recognize our existence. Their ideology is so focused on creating the state of Israel that nothing else matters. And we're saying if we are the church of Jesus Christ. We are the church for all, not for one person. But with the moment we start weaponizing the Bible, weaponizing the prophecies, and justify killing, we are no longer about the love of God and the mercy of God. We are about political agendas. We are about stealing more land. and we are about continuing the colonial settler movement in the world. And if you look, who is supporting Israel now? Countries who have colonial settler history. The United States, Germany, Canada, France, Britain. It's all these countries who have settler history are the ones who are supporting Israel. Therefore, for us as the church, for us as the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, our job and our duty is to create that responsible theology that will fight the dehumanization of the other. To say that theology does not represent us, and that theology is a false theology that does not represent the Church of Jesus Christ. It does not preach mercy and love and inflict pain on the other. That means it does not align with what God wants for us in the world today. So I am thankful for your church, thankful for you, thankful for your discipleship, and thankful that we are able to engage in this, which can be controversial, polarized conversation, but can we hear each other because we are witnessing injustice, we are witnessing pain and suffering, we are witnessing genocide and destruction, we are witnessing things that are done in our name without our permission for the sake of politics. And we need to be the church that speaks love, mercy, the church that works for justice, the church that stands for peace, the church that stands for unity and inclusivity for all. I will share more through the questions.
All right.
Let's do that.
Okay.
It's getting hot in here.
Now it's your turn. We have time for questions. If you have questions for Pastor Khader, and so the people out there can enjoy it as well.
Hello.
We have the microphones on. So who's our first? Jack, you're going to go to Mark. Sure. Yeah.
I just have a very simple question. If I go to the ELCA website, how do you spell Samud so I can put that in?
Oh, that's very easy. It is S-U-M-U-D. S-U-M-U-D. Steadfastness.
In the church, we tend to want to play it safe and all of that. If we do not do advocacy, what is the cost?
Thank you. One of the biggest challenges for me as a Lutheran pastor in the ELCA, that when we develop a statement on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we spend so much time in wordsmithing because we don't want to offend anybody. And I don't think that is a bold proclamation of the gospel and taking a strong stand for justice. And the cost of being silent means that you are complicit. It means that you are part of the problem, you are not part of the solution. In the gospel for tomorrow, we'll hear that we will be given the advocate. That's mean we are called to do the advocacy as the church. And the result of us not being active in faith, in love, in community, and in action, that's mean people are going to die. The weak, the poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged, the homeless, the occupied, those who live in corrupt systems and experience famine, they will die. So therefore, our advocacy becomes incredibly important as we go and speak to power and change systems of power that dehumanize and victimize people. We as the church have the calling to change these systems of power that make people continue to live in poverty. Systems of power that allows Israel to exist for 76 years and occupy other people. That's why the work of advocacy is critical. Unfortunately, and I have to say this with all honesty, we can take a lesson from the Muslims. They are not shy about where they stand. They are very vocal, they are very bold. where we as the church, even our own Christian message is being compromised by our complicity. I know, it's like, can you create it? But even our Christian message, our young people are questioning our faith. My daughter, 19 years old, she came to me and said, Dad, I went to church Sunday, not a word about Gaza, not a word to pray for peace, not a word to speak about justice. She said, Dad, I can't even go back to church. Our young people are seeing these horrifying images on their screens, and the church is silent. And we are losing our young people. And I have a lot of Muslim friends, and they tell me, your young people are converting to Islam because they see our work with advocacy. Isn't it the time for you guys to wake up? They are saying this to me. So that's where really it is. It is our own Christian witness to the gospel is being questioned because of our complicity in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Where the church, when we issue statement with this flowery language, where you see Germany is still refusing to say one word about the genocide that's happening in Gaza and continue to support Israel with weapons. So when we look at all these dynamics, it's impacting our faith, our witness to the gospel, our bold proclamation of the good news, but also we are losing our young people because the Bible of our young people is the social justice Bible. If we like it or we don't like it, their Bible is the social justice Bible. They care so much about social justice, racial justice, advocacy, more than you can imagine. They are willing to cross lines. They are willing to interact with people who are from different ethnic backgrounds, different religions, which was not our norm, but our young people are doing it. And they're looking for us to lead, but they see that we lack the leadership because we want to please everybody. We don't want to offend. You know what? I always say, Jesus was nailed on the cross for you. So what are you sacrificing for the sake of justice? That's a deep question. We need to think about it. We, as Palestinian Christians, always spoke against the Israeli occupation and the injustice of the occupation, but we also always spoke about our willingness to engage in the acts of reconciliation and healing. The Israeli government always said there is no partner on the Palestinian side. And we always said there is no partner on the Israeli side because all what you invested in and interested in is killing, building walls, and taking more land. We don't need walls. We need bridges. That's what we need. We need bridges that can bring us together to end the human suffering for both Israelis and Palestinians. Sorry, that was a long answer for a short one. So, I told you I functioned better with the questions. So, all right.
So help me with the question.
I know when I get to the dessert, we'll get to it, I promise. Anything that, go ahead, until he gets to the microphone. Anything that you ever have a conversation with your neighbor, things come up, or things really bothered you, or things that really moved you, let's talk about that.
So thank you for your words. Are you seeing a shift now that you are at the ELCA? You're in a position of maybe influence. Are you seeing a shift? We've been here at this church for almost 30 plus years. We've seen a shift from Pastor Tom Barbrett to Pastor Walter. And we've seen shifts. And, but we don't see it any other places because there has to be some folks like Pastor Walter and others that, start waking up to the situation and learning more and taking groups to see the other side of the world, like we are reading the book. So are you seeing a shift? Now you're part of the ELCA. And what can we do as part of this church or other ELCA churches to help your mission of what you're trying to do?
Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that question. So let me tell you the reality, and I'm going to be very honest here. There is a shift, and there is a huge questioning of realities that many of our pastors and many of our people were impacted and influenced with. They start questioning reality based on what they are seeing today. What's happening in our church today? We have this huge movement of people want to learn and get educated. But one pastor writes one letter to the presiding bishop to express opposition and to defend Israel. That one person takes all the life and the energy and centers the conversation, which is part of the culture of fear that has been created, that we don't want it to be anti-Semites. And we are saying there's a big difference between being an anti-Semite and being an advocate for justice. But the paralyzation that comes with it, you get paralyzed, you can't move. And I get panicked phone calls. Oh, we just received a phone call. The presiding bishop just received a letter from a pastor, and he's criticizing our policies and where we stand on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That sucks the air out of the room. We need to stop dealing and behaving out of fear. We need to deal and behave out of a strong conviction of our beliefs of who we are as the disciples of Jesus in the world today. Jesus said to his disciples, go to all nations. That's mean we need to go to accompany them. That's mean learning about their hopes, dreams, pains, suffering, joys. We need to go and be with them. Jesus said, go to all people. And this command is beautiful because it opens the door for us to say, how can we accompany you in this journey? How we can walk together? How we can feel each other's pain? But when we start focusing all our time and energy on responding to one person because he or she or they sent a letter, that's really not a commitment of a church to the cause of justice and peace. But yes, we have made a commitment at the church-wide organization that every elected new bishop, that he or she will go to Palestine after they are elected. And that's part of the orientation and the onboarding to see the other side of the wall and to see our companions in the Holy Land and the work and the ministry that they are doing. So every bishop, the moment they are elected, they will go. We have about 11 bishops will be going June 17 to the 27th. And we have talked a lot about should we cancel it or not. And you know what? They said we want to go. Bishop Eaton and I, we were supposed to fly to Jerusalem tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Monday. And we received an email from United Airlines that they canceled our flights. All American airlines, Delta, United, American, and all canceled their flights to Israel. It started last week till June 7th. No reason given, no justification. They just canceled our flights. And they put a statement that all flights to Israel are canceled till June 7th. So yes, there is shift. There is intentionality. There is, we are bringing our Lutheran Palestinian pastors to the U.S. to speak, to educate, to engage, to correct the record, to introduce responsible theology that can give what the Bible means for us in our lives today, and to combat and fight the bad theology that comes out from the Christian Zionist movement. I think that's a huge victory in the struggle against the injustice of the occupation. By introducing a responsible theology, and I use the word responsible theology because there are a lot of theologies are not responsible, that dehumanize, victimize, and marginalize people. And it is part of the empowerment of the colonial settler movement. And that's why I say we need a strong, responsible theology to fight these ideologies.
Why don't the people in Gaza just leave? Why did they just stay for so long?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, if you go back to the history, Gaza actually was created by Israel. They took the 2% of the land and they created that, and they took all the people from the villages and towns around there and they put them in Gaza. So the people in Gaza already been displaced from their homes in 1948 and 1967. All their homes were destroyed, and all the Israeli settlements, which is illegally against international law, was built on their homes around Gaza. And the people in Gaza have been displaced from their homes many, many times. And now go from the south to the north, from the north to the south, go here. There's nowhere else to go. The massive destruction and the systematic killing of what's happening in Gaza is beyond comprehension. And when you hear what was her name, the candidate for president, Nikki Haley, will say, why didn't they just leave? Leave where? Why no Arab countries will take them? Why should they take them? They have a home, they have a land. They want to stay in their homes, they want to stay on their land. So the rationale and sometimes the things we hear on American TV, like when Nikki Haley says, well, no Arab country will take them. Trust me, we don't want to go to any other Arab country. We want to stay in our home, in our land. That's where we are grounded, that's where we are rooted, that's where our olive trees are. That's where my great-grandfather is buried. You think we want to leave and go anywhere? We don't. But this replacement theology that take the Palestinians out and bring all these Jews from all over the world to come, that is a very dangerous theology, because when Israel started, the whole Zionist movement started, you know what they said? A land without people, for people without land. Did you hear that before? That's what they said. It's an empty land. Nobody lives there. It's a land without people, for people without land. Hello? We are here. It was not empty. But they convinced the world. So it is, as Pastor Munder says, we are willing to coexist and live together. Even though we are the owners of the land, but we are willing to share. I mean, when I called for a two-state solution, I'm already recognizing the state of Israel. The question is, does the state of Israel recognizes my right to exist? That is the question. It's not about the existence of Israel. Israel is existing already. The question is, do Palestinians have the right to exist on their historical land? And if you go back to the United Nations and look at the United Nations resolutions, that was already passed in 1967, that they will have two-state solution. And you will go and see 242 and I think 168. But that was never implemented. And every time we go to the United Nations, there is something against Israel. Guess who vetoed that? The US. Even about ceasefire. How many times the US vetoed ceasefire? Every single time. So we cannot have that continue. And then we will say, okay, we'll take a couple of airplanes and we'll drop food on Gaza to relieve the pain and the suffering and the hunger. And you go drop food in Gaza, and one of them malfunctioned and killed 5 people. Sad, it's tragic. They either think we are fools. That's what they are thinking. You're gonna drop some food from an airplane that's gonna end up in the ocean or beyond reach in the West Bank where they cannot get to it, where the Israelis are. And one of them might get on target, and the rest will malfunction and kill people. Is that what the U.S. values and principles are? I don't think so.
You're familiar with Bread for the World?
Yes.
I wonder if we could take a page out of what they do, which is the offering of letters. And we could create a letter and so that it says what we really want to say. And then a given time, everybody could write that letter and we could put it together, whether it's directed to the ELCA or directed to our representatives in government. And they've accomplished a lot by doing that because they put them on the spot and say, look, we are citizens of this country and we are deeply disturbed by what's happening in Israel, and we want some action, something that will contribute toward peace and do it together. I'm looking for something to do.
Well, Pastor Paul will put you. Yeah. But also our advocacy office have put a lot of statements out there, a lot of formats for letters that you can adopt and use and write for your elected officials. I was in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, and I visited with Hakeem Jeffries' office. And one of the things that shocked me to my core, that his chief of staff said to me, you are the first religious group who come to this office to speak to us about Palestine and ceasefire. I was shocked. I said, what do you mean? He said, you are the first group. It was me, and I have with me 4 bishops. So we organized to go to Washington, D.C., where we go and meet with elected officials to speak about ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and ending the U.S. support to Israel through weapons and financial support. And Hakeem Jeffries' chief of staff says to me, you are the first religious group that comes to our office to speak about this issue. And I said, well, thank you for telling me. I went out there and I said, okay, let's get every group to organize and go to his office. And this is what he said to me. I was with Reverend, he's a senator from, Georgia. Yeah. So he said, when you make a phone call, yeah. When you write a letter, yeah. But when you come to visit, yes. So I was visiting with him and I said to him, I would love to invite you to come with me to Palestine so you can see the situation from Palestinian eyes. And he said, why, you want me to go to the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem with Pastor Munder Isaac? I've been there twice. He's a senator, and he said, I'm not a senator who happened to be a pastor. I'm a pastor who is a senator. So he takes that very seriously. He flies to his home congregation every week to preach. And I said, I would love to hear a sermon from you about ceasefire. He said, we come. But it's all about relationships. It's about how we organize, how we show up, and when we show up, why we showing up, that's what will make the difference. At the end of the day, I am also a politician, right? I ran for office. I worked on so many different campaigns. All these things are driven by votes. And elected officials don't care about anything except 2 things: money and votes. At the end of the day, that's what they want.
The 2 U.S. senators from Michigan have not publicly called for a ceasefire. Shocking. And there have been thousands of phone calls, and Pastor Walters has a sheet that's a simple thing, and it's as simple as this. I'm Jack Eggleston. I live in Trenton, Michigan. This is my email address. This is my phone number, and I'm calling to ask you to publicly call for a ceasefire. There are a few people in Congress, 3 from Michigan, Rashida Tlaib, Debbie Dingell, and Dale Kildee, who've done that. The others have not. But it's as simple as that. There's a script. You don't have to get in an argument with a staff person. All you have to do is leave a voicemail. And there's a thing that will be in there where you can send an email to the White House. And just keep pounding away at that. Call once a week. That's a voice that I think will make a difference. And maybe, at least it gives me hope when people say that they will do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I will really encourage you very much that you do that. And it's not only on issues of Palestine and Israel. Whenever there is an issue in our community, for us as the church, we really need to step up and be the advocates, to speak that truth, to change these systems of oppression. So I was in India, and the pastor says to me a statement that I will never forget. He said, wherever the church exists, that community should never experience injustice. And the reason I went to visit him, because his community is one of these beautiful communities that he did so much community organizing. Everybody is engaged, connected, even though the diversity of religions is overwhelming. Every walk of life existed in that little area where his church existed. But he said, because the church exists here, injustice cannot exist. And he works with every person, and whenever he sees injustice in his community, he is the first one with his little church to show up, to organize, to engage, and to start working on changing that reality. Because he said when the church exists, injustice cannot exist. That's, to me, is very powerful. That's what it means to live into our baptismal vows. And you know, the first promise in our baptismal vows, you know what is it? The fifth promise? To strive for justice and peace in the world. That's the fifth promise that we make in our baptism. To strive for justice and peace in the world. That is part of our baptismal vows, our baptismal commitment, that we will work for justice and peace in the world.
Thank you, Pastor. What a gift and what a blessing to have you with us.
I'm getting out easy.
You are? Oh, well, any other questions? Anybody got any other takers?
Well, I just want to say at the end, I want to invite your prayers because my family lives in the Bethlehem area. Your family lives in Ramallah area. I will conclude with this story. My sister Nisreen, which you heard her name, who refused to take the green card and come to this country, her husband and his family been in courts for years fighting the Israeli settlers because they're trying to take their land. It's called the Tent of Nations. If you go to the website, Google Tent of Nations, they've been fighting the Israeli settlers for years who are trying to take their land. And the case is in the Israeli High Court now. As you go to visit the land, there's a big stone that carved on it. They carved on it that says, "We refuse to be enemies." Even though they've been struggling for 30 years to protect their lands from the settlers coming in. And what's happened, the settlers every now and then, they go into the land, they destroy all the trees, they destroy the houses. Now the Israeli government has not given them permission to build on the land, yet they have put tents, and now they have international guests who come from all over the world to live in the land in tents or in caves to protect it from the Israeli settlers to take it. That's the reality that they have to deal with it every single day. But my sister was blessed with a beautiful, beautiful young boy. But he's 6 years old, and he got diagnosed with cancer. And if you ever heard or know, Pastor will tell you, Augusta Victoria Hospital, which is a Lutheran hospital in Jerusalem, on Mount of Olives, it is the only provider for oncology and dialysis services to the Palestinian people. So every time to take him from Beit Jala, the Bethlehem region, to Jerusalem, which is about, in a good day, if there is nothing, will be 10 minutes drive, let's say 15-minute drive, but with the checkpoints and the closures, she's unable to take him to receive his chemotherapy and treatments. 6-year-old kid. With all this, I begged her to come here, to bring him and to move back to the US, and she said to me, I will never do that, cannot do that. We fought way too hard for this land for us to leave it now. That is the very definition of resistance, through the existence of the Palestinian people there. She's taken the risk for her son that he might die because of the cancer and the lack of treatment and medication. They have spent years in courts. 2 years ago, they were attacked, not only by the settlers, but also by a Muslim village next door, and ended up the president and everybody and the bishops going to the land to stand with them in solidarity. But they are standing in the land. So your voice, your advocacy, your prayers, and solidarity is what's going to keep them in that land. Thank you.
So I see folks here who I do not know, which is a blessing, or are familiar to me but not that familiar. Pastor Dylan is going to get a pad of paper and a pen for us, and in the coming week we will be sending out advocacy information and some of the details that Pastor Khader talked about, things like that. And if you are not somebody on the LCM mailing list, and if we don't have your contact information, name and email address on the sheet that we'll have in the back, and then we'll be able to include you in that mailing and get that information out to you too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the Crisis in the Holy Land journey. Thank you for reading Pastor Munder's book and for discussing it. And if you didn't read the book, thank you for watching the video. And if you didn't watch the video, it's on YouTube and it's 20 minutes and it's worth the time. And if you haven't watched the movie Father K, Amazon Prime has it. You can get it on Apple. You can $3-4. You can watch it. It's a powerful testimony as well. And we have treats from Farhat Sweets, because you've been so good and faithful. You get a blessing as well. So thank you. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Pentecost Sunday celebration, and Pastor Khader will be our preacher. So come join us then as well.